I'm back with another video for honeybee stamps. Today we are going to be using the potted poinsettias, stamps and dies, as well as the Nordic winter stencil. So I have some, this is actually Nina Desert Storm, but any craft cardstock will do. And I am going to be doing more of like a subtle background. I'm using the detail blender brushes from Honeybee. This one is the largest, and then I'll also be using the middle one in our new brilliant white pigment ink. Maybe I'm the only person this has ever happened to, but I'm not really great about cleaning my supplies. I'm just gonna be honest with it. So I thought that the stencil was just stained, but clearly the last time I used it, I didn't clean it as well as it should be cleaned. So when I went in with my white pigment ink, it ended up being a little bit like a grayish blue, which was actually fine. I just rolled with it. But the intention was originally for all of this to be white. But because I am a big fan of not starting over, I just went with it. We're putting down, pigment ink takes a long time to dry if you're not familiar. And so we're putting down such a small amount though. It really dried very fast. And in fact, I was like, well, maybe I can just skip the second step and I can just heat emboss this background. And I tried and it wouldn't even stick to it because it was already so dry. So this is just a way you can get kind of a subtle background. In order to, I use repositionable adhesive on the back of my stencils. And so I'm just going through with my adhesive eraser once everything is dry and getting up any of the parts that are still a little bit sticky. I think I had to wait, I don't know. I waited like 60 seconds maybe in between when I blended it and when I erased it. It was fine. But this stencil set actually is a stencil set of 2. And so it has this other stencil in it that you can use to kind of bold up the other lines, like the central design. And so for this one, and this is like this easiest way to heat emboss with your stencils and use them like a stamp and stretch your supplies and get more with what you have, which you guys always know I'm a big proponent of. I'm using this smaller, not the smallest, the middle detail blending brush and our clear embossing ink. And I'm using it just like I'd be ink blending. And I'm going right over everything. And this will put the embossing ink exactly where the stencil is. You can see it here. And you could leave it like this, where it's just maybe a little bit darker. But I'm going to add embossing powder to it to make it shiny and metallic. So because my background wasn't white, and it was a little bit more grayish blue, I decided that I was going to go with the satin pearl embossing powder from Hero Arts, which is more of like... It's not a silver. It's like a light, maybe it is. It's like a light silver. It's like pearly. It's super pretty and you'll see it once we heat set it. But yeah, so that's what I chose to go with just because of the way that the other part of the background went. And it's okay to change your game plan. It's okay to roll with it and, make do with what you've got. So this is a beautiful embossing powder. Love this one. And so I'm just going to heat set this until it is smooth. And then I'm going to use this as a portion of my background. It's a nice way to get more for the money that we spend, Plus, this stencil is super cute. So I have my little detail, which is a little more subtle. And then I have like the bolder lines. For the coloring, so I've used this set one time before. And I really thought that I would enjoy it a little bit more if the lines were not as bold. I know that that sounds crazy coming from me, but I just thought that it would be better if it didn't have such a bold black outline. And so here we are with my cheater's method of no line coloring. And that is to stamp in the same color of ink. So I'm going to be layering this to get some dimension. So I stamped it the first time in charcoal, knowing that I was going to make my basket gray. Whatever color you want them to be, that's what you want to stamp in. And now I'm going to stamp it again using pine. And this time I'm just concentrating my ink application where the leaves are. And then I stamped each of these twice. just for transparency. So I'm going to stamp it twice, and then I'm going to stamp it a third time, each time cleaning my stamp in between so I don't get any contamination. I'm going to stamp it a third time in red. And this is going to give me the opportunity to no line color it without losing my lines, which is, if you guys watched my video the other day, I told you my biggest frustration with no line coloring in the beginning was losing my lines. And then I would get frustrated, and then my image would look muddy, and I couldn't figure out where I needed to put the next amount of shading. And so doing something like this, where you're stamping in the same color, maintains those lines. I'm not going to lose them as I'm adding my shading, just because they're the same shade. So when I'm doing my lightest color, it's still going to give me a no line look, and still something that's very pretty. A true no line, no. Close enough for me, absolutely. So here I'm going to go in with my grays, and I'm going to add shading. Remember the rules, where one object lays on top of another, so where my leaves lay on top of my basket, and any point where two objects meet, that's where you want to add your shading. And so I'm also coloring this as if it has a center highlight, meaning I'm going to add shading to the left and the right hand side, and this is just going to give my basket a more round appearance. In order to maintain the design but not have it so in my face, I am going to add a little bit of shading in between the design, to help it stand out a little bit, but not so much that you're like just punched in the face with it, which is really how I was feeling like I would like this stamp. And that's the joy of having so many different techniques and so many different mediums, that sometimes when you look at a stamp, it just, a particular technique, like, you can't get rid of it. It's in your head and you're like, no, it'll look so good this way. And I'm going to be honest with you, I feel like it looks so good this way. Maybe no line's not for you, or the look of no line is not for you, but I think this stamp really shines its brightest with a no line coloring look, which is why I did it. So now we are moving out. We're almost out to our darkest color, and you can see that I'm adding the shading in between the design, like this herringbone design that's there, and I'm just outlining it, to be quite honest. That's all I'm doing, and that's just to help maintain those lines in that design. I'm not trying to disappear it. I am just trying to minimize the design. So if I wanted to disappear it, I would have colored it differently. I wouldn't have put those shading bits in. I would have just colored it as if it was a solid image. But I'm just minimizing the pattern, which can be useful on multiple stamps, again, to stretch your supplies and get a different kind of look. You don't have to use gray. You can use, this would be pretty in brown or golds even, just whatever kind of, or if you wanted to do a white poinsettia, this would look really pretty in red. So lots of options. So now once I have all my shading added, I'm going to work from my darkest color back out to my lightest color, maintaining that center highlight. And then also you can see at the bottom, I am shading, what do you call it? It's like the feet, like the little stand part underneath a pot that raises it up. I'm also adding a little bit of shading there where those two things are meeting. And then, of course, continuing to blend out that, like the shapes of the designs that I've added shading to. For my lightest color, again, adding it to the left and the right, and everywhere else pretty much. The only place I didn't add it is right in the center, and in that case, I only added it to the bits I wanted shaded. I am going to go in, and you'll see here, I picked a mid-tone for my greens, not my lightest color, not my darkest color, one in the middle, whichever one you like if you use a 4-color blend like I do. And I'm just going to add a little bit of color here because I know I'm going to stack these on top of each other. And so in case there's any parts that end up peeking through. I want it to be green. I don't want it to be this glaring white that's peeking through. So I'm going to do the same thing with my greenery. I'm going to go in with my lightest color. And here, when you have a busier image, I feel like busy sounds bad. And that's not how I mean it. When you have an image that has more in it, okay? Like it has all these little detail lines and things like that. It can sometimes be very overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be if you have a plan of attack. And the plan of attack is mapping. So when I went in with my lightest color, I literally just filled in all of the things I wanted to be leaves, because now I know I can ignore the rest. At least for this layer. I don't have to worry about what the rest of everything else is doing. I only need to concentrate on the part that is green. And I am leaving the veins or the lines that are drawn in it in my lightest color with a shading of my first mid-tone. After that, I'm pretty much going to leave those alone, and I will only be adding shading to the open areas in between each vein, as well as the open portion of the leaf. And again, we're adding shading where they're coming out from underneath the poinsettias, because the poinsettias are laying on top of each other, and we are adding shading where they meet each other, where the leaves are next to each other. So yeah, just really big fan. I think that this one came out. I'm not normally, like I said, I love a big, bold, black outline. But sometimes you just look at an image and you're like, no, this is the thing that's going to make you be beautiful, and I'm going to help. So we had Caitlin's first birthday pictures, and it was work. Dude, we worked for it. Like, she was not into it. And then she started to get tired, and like Eric and I, we had to hustle. In front of a cappella, which, let me tell you, I can't carry a tune in a bucket. In front of her family, my family, the whole deal. I had to sing happy birthday to her so that she would start laughing. For some reason, my child likes when I sing to her. I don't think that she knows that mommy cannot sing well. And so it just brings her joy. And so I sang her happy birthday probably like 5 different times. And then I had to like hide in the corner so that she would, be in the frame, but I wouldn't be in the frame. And then she could kind of come back and check on her. And then Eric's on the other side, trying to make her laugh. We're letting her have her pacifier. And then like yanking it out of her mouth at the last minute. So she starts laughing or smiling. She was just having a time of it. Fortunately, our photographer, she does her sessions at home. And so she has kids who are also Peanut's age. So like he went in the other room and played Fortnite while we did this, though he did come back in to see her do her cake. And I got to tell you, she treated it exactly the way she treated it at her first party. Back to the card. So here I'm doing the same thing with the poinsettia, because I know I'm going to be layering the poinsettia on top of the leaves. I'm adding just a little bit of red. Again, I just picked a mid-tone, and then I will be doing the same thing for the gray, just because I'll be cutting it out. And so if there's any, edges that I miss or something, if it's not a super clean trim, I'll have that gray on the edge, which will blend in to the coloring that we already did. And now this layer is done. I had to do 3 different pieces because this particular image is so big. But if you did the other images in the set, you wouldn't have to use 3 different pieces. They would fit on there, and then you could just be able to fit them into each other, like to layer them like a normal image. This is just showing you how to do the no line coloring, kind of the cheater's way, with an image that would have multiple colors. So this is my lightest color. This is an R20. Again, I mapped everything out and filled it in. Now I'm going to tell you this one piece in the top left, and you'll be able to see when I put the overlay on top of it, should be part of the flower. And I colored it as a leaf. And I could have gone back and changed it, because this piece will lay on top of the other one. And I chose not to. And the reason I chose not to is because you can make it whatever you want. Did you know? You can. And in fact, one of my teammates, super talented people on the Honeybee team, used some of these petals in the back. I colored them as petals. She colored them green and used them as leaves so that there was some greenery in the background. Beautiful. Great idea. So don't feel like you don't have to be so married to it, especially in a stamp like this one where everything is similarly drawn. You can decide what's a leaf and what's a petal, whatever makes you happy. And so again, I did these because they are drawn similarly to the leaves. I left the veins the lightest color with a little bit of shading from this R32. And then I added my darker shading with the R35 and an R29. The R59, we'll talk about when we get there, but we used it very sparingly. I know darks are intimidating, so we'll come back to that. But yeah, so, I mean, girlfriend made us work for it. I wanted, because this photo shoot was just her, it wasn't like her and family photos. So I wanted her in a couple of different outfits. I wanted one that was more like neutral, and then her little birthday outfit with her tutu and her unicorn. And then I had another one that was just a really adorable, like little burnt orange, like sweatshirt with little, like little diaper cover almost. Like they're not even shorts. It like just covers her bum. And so I wanted one with that. But by the time we got to that one, it was not happening. That one was supposed to be, and I hope we got at least one shot. I don't know if we did, because honestly, by that time she was over it. She was over it. The girl that I think we've talked about her before, Liz, she's wonderful. She was an intern when I ran that program at the previous police department that I worked at, the one Eric still works at, and then she nannied after college for a little bit, so she sometimes watches Caitlin for us. And she's wonderful, but her birthday present to Caitlin was a little Squishmallow, adorable, and then she got her a little blanket that says her name on it. It says Caitlin on it. And so it's like a mustard yellow color with her name written in white. And I thought, well, that would be perfect for like more of a fall photo. So I hope that we got at least one with her cute little blankie, but I'm telling you, I don't know if we nailed it or not. She did the same thing, like I said, with her cake, that she would barely put her hand in it. She like used her little pincher fingers, like little pincers to pick up some frosting. But then at some point she was tired and she got unhappy. She was tired and she got unhappy and she kind of like threw a fit. And you know how kids throw a fit? They just throw themselves on the floor. Yeah, she totally just stuck her foot right in her cake. Both feet. Then it's on her tutu, it's on her feet, she's rubbing it all over the place, she's crying, she's got the snots. So I will be very interested. Photographers are magic, you know, like, you know what went on and how often your kid cried and all of this stuff. And then somehow you still end up with like 7 to 10 images where they actually look happy, but you know, behind the scenes, ain't nobody was happy. Not a single person was happy. Like, she was playing kids shows, was singing and like holding it up above her camera to try to get her to stop crying and smile and pay attention. She was tired. It just was what it was. And that's okay. We'll laugh about it when she gets older. Hopefully, like I said, we get a handful of images for her first birthday that we can be happy with. And, you know, when someday, if she chooses to have children, I'll be able to tell her when she's complaining about taking her kids for their first photos and how they would not cooperate. I'll be able to remind her about how she was having none of it. She was having none of it. So normally when I color a bunch of poinsettias or a bunch of flowers, I don't leave the whole thing in. This time, I didn't really have a choice. I'm going to be honest. There wasn't like a good place to cut it because I colored it all at the same time. So now we're here to the darkest color. And I know dark colors are scary, but I'm going to show you how little I add. Okay, we're literally, you can see, we're just doing little dots, little lines of color in the portion that we want it to be the darkest. And it makes such an immense difference, even with just that little bit. So, like, somebody had mentioned when I did the honeybee live that I think it was Abby. Was it Abby? I think it was Abby. No, it was Olivia. Olivia, I see you. She had mentioned, like, she ends up doing her coloring with, like, 2-color blends because she's so afraid of the dark color. Girl, if you want dimension, you have to put dark color in there. You have to. Even if it's just a little teeny tiny amount. Look how little we added here. And, I mean, already this image is, like, popping, because it creates that separation. So we have to have some shadows along with our highlights to create dimension, or everything is going to look very flat and very one layer. And then you're not happy with your coloring. You got to use the darks. You have to do it. Don't be afraid. I have faith in you. You can do it. So now that I have my darkest color down, I'm going back in with my R29 just to blend out the darkest portions of it. And then I will just continue per usual, the lightest to darkest. Now we're back out darkest to lightest. And you know how people say about watercolor, like there's always this hot mess phase that you're in and you're like, oh my gosh, this is not going to be good. Is very, very not pretty. It's ugly even, if you will. But then they tell you, like, you got to push through. I tell you, you got to push through. I don't know who the infamous they is, because I'm one of the people who's saying it. You got to push through. With no line coloring, or when you're doing more dimensional coloring, even with a black outline sometimes, there's a time in which the image just looks like a sloppy mess, and we're coming upon it. But once you like do what you need to do, go through lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest, and as you're adding the lightest color, that I swear to you, that is when it all comes together. Like, I know I'm looking at it like you're looking at it, like, what is even happening here? This looks crazy. It looks wild. I can't tell what's a petal, what's not. I can't tell what's where the flowers separate. I can't tell none of that. But when you add back the lightest color, when you work all the way back and all of your hard work pays off, it will look so different, so differently than the middle stages. Don't judge your art on its middle stage. That would be like me going in to do my hair and makeup, curling half my head and, putting on half my foundation and half my eyeshadow and being like, well, this isn't going to be good. I don't look good. I'm just going to leave it. No. Curl the other side of your head. Put on the other eyeshadow and you will see how it comes together. So don't give up. Boys can wear makeup too. So, but that analogy might not be true for everybody, but you get the picture I'm painting is what I'm saying. So we're getting out here now. This is my second to lightest color, and you can really start to see now the separation of the flowers, the details in the petals. And again, it's going to be that like bam, pow, hey, look what I colored moment when we do the lightest color here, this R20. I'm going to bring everything home for us. And I just went over everything with it to make sure I got a good blend on everything. It's going to lighten up a little bit of my darks and help my midtones blend. I just covered everything with this R20. And now you can see the difference. You can see those highlights kind of popping. You can see the recessed areas where the shadows are. And it looks like 3 separate flowers. Yay! Like, she's so pretty. We did it. So for the centers, I just chose a 3-color kind of like yellow blend, my normal go-to, that had really very minimal shading. So I did lightest to darkest, and then I just blended it back out with my lightest. I didn't really feel like it needed all that jazz. I did mean to, and I didn't do it. I did mean to go back in and put some dots of white in the center. It doesn't look bad without it, but, it would look extra with it, and I'm all about the extra. So, yeah, I mean, you could put dots of white in the center. I think that would be pretty. Do it. So now we have all three of these colored. I am going to use the coordinating die to cut them out. And you could fussy cut them if you don't have the dies. It would still work because we are going to be doing a little bit of fussy cutting. So these are all cut out. And now this is the fussy cutting portion. So I'm going to, the one that is my colored basket is my base. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to cut just along where the leaves are. You'll see on the outside edges, I left the white die cut portion to line up with the base that I'm using. So that way everything lines up really nicely. I know how everything is supposed to go together. And I don't have to worry that it's not going to go in the spot that it wants. And so already you can see we're building up this image that looks so cute together with this no line look that was way easier to achieve by stamping in color. So now that's the whole image. Super happy with the way that they came out. I'm not mad at all about that petal that I decided to put as a leaf. I think it's cute. And then for my background, it felt a little much. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a busy person. So here I'm trimming this down to 4 by 4 1/4. I just made it slightly longer. And this I'm going to mount on some warm gray cardstock. And it's going to act as my backdrop, but it also gives me the opportunity for the bottom portion of the gray to act as my ground. And that's really why I chose to do it, to cut down on the busyness and give myself some ground. So I'm going to glue this all together so that it is one image and I can move it around like one image. I am going to color the white die cuts, like the edge of the die cuts, so that it blends in a little bit better. And you can do that before you glue it if you wanted. I chose to do it after I glued it and I didn't really run into any issues. But of course, if you're more comfortable doing it first before you glue it, totally fine. It's different, but different doesn't mean bad. Different just means different. You know what I'm saying? So now these are all together. I'll be able to just pick them up and move them as one piece, which really makes my life a ton easier because I don't like those finicky bits. This I'm going to glue down in the top portion of my card. And I think that like trimming down your panels is kind of like a great way to get a little bit of pattern, a little bit of texture, but still maintain, if you're a clean and simple card maker, maintain a little bit more of a clean background. So here I am, like I said, coloring in those white areas. I am going to go back in and do some shading on the bottom. So I'm not really too worried about the shading around the base of the plant. I know I'm going to add a shadow underneath it. And then I found one that matched pretty well. I think I used a W3, and I am going to use the warm grays as well for my shadow. So I'm just going to hold this in place while I do my shadow underneath it. I did go up into that die cut so that it would blend into my scene. And this is going to look really dark when we first start, but no worries. The alcohol has to dry. Like this is a W1. This is not that dark, not even on white. So it has to dry back a little bit to blend in. And then you could pop this up. Something to note, in between the layers, you could add like Scotch foam tape or whatever to pop up the layers in between to get a really dimensional image. But I liked it just the way that it was, so I glued it down flat. Here, you guys know I like to leave my mistakes in. I'm all about that. So the first time I did this, used my anti-static tool, our clear embossing pad, stamped that down, and then my intention was to use that same satin white pearl color, and that is what I did, and I thought that it would be super pretty, but it didn't really show up. Like, you could see it when the light caught it, but you couldn't see it if you were just looking right at it because it was just too close to this gray color. So like here you can see it in the light as I'm heat embossing it, but when you look at it straight on, it looks just like a watermark ink. So I decided to do it again. And I did it right on top of my old embossing because I'm lazy and I want to save my paper. So I just went back in, treated it with the anti-static tool, used our same clear embossing ink, and then I stamped right over top of it. And this time I used white and it worked just fine. So I wouldn't recommend overheating it and giving the embossing powders an opportunity to mix. I just heated it until it was melted and smooth, and then I moved on. But it worked just fine. Like there's one little area, I think on my P, where it wasn't perfectly lined up, and it looks like I have a little bit of a silver shadow, but like worse things could happen, for sure. So now I'm using the coordinating dies to cut them out. And again, I'm just going to glue them down flat because, I don't know, I just wasn't all about the dimension for this one. I wanted my coloring to look dimensional, but I didn't want my card to be extra dimensional. So then once I get these in place, I'm going to use the Holiday Pearl stickers just to kind of accent my sentiment. You guys know that I do enjoy doing that, and they have these really pretty silver colored pearls in there, but like a pale silver. You'll see what I mean here in a second. And those worked really well for that. And then of course I added the shimmers. So yeah, Caitlin's whole she already has the sneak peeks up. Like we were just there this morning at 11 a.m. and she already has the sneak peeks up. So I did share one over on Instagram. I'll have to put one up on the community page so you guys can see how cute she is in her little tutu. But yeah, so I did the shimmer and then that's it. That's the whole card. So I hope you guys learned something. I hope that you're interested in maybe stretching your supplies, whether it be for a no-line look or using the stencils to do heat embossing. But either or, I hope that you take something away that's helpful from this video. I appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.